a new time boundary, and I do want to afford you all the opportunity to ask questions and so on and so on. So it might feel like I'm moving rather quickly through the slides, but that's in recognition of the fact that we want to make sure that we get at least to the last slide, but also have an opportunity for questions and answers. So one of the first aspects of Smarter Balance is it is a state-led consortium, and as was the case with the Common Core Standards, which were developed in cooperation between the Governors Association and the Chief School Officers Association, Smarter Balance did receive a grant from the Department of Education to develop an assessment system, but I work for the states in the consortium. There are 27 states in the consortium. Hawaii is one of them. Hawaii is a governing state, one of 21 governing states, meaning that Hawaii is part of the policy team that makes decisions for the consortium. We are organized around 10 work groups, and as my colleague Tony Alpert, who's over talking to the state board right now, likes to say, we've built a plan that by all designs shouldn't work, but apparently it does, and it works quite well, which is imagine having about 100 people across 28 states working in collaboration with each other on various important components of the assessment system. And that's what we have in our 10 work groups. So we have an item development work group, a performance task work group, a work group on accessibility and accommodations, a work group on reporting, one on overall test design, final all the way down through validation and psychometrics. So each of those has about 10 people on it working from states across the consortium. They're led by 2 co-chairs that come from our governing states, and they essentially get the work done with regard to describing the kinds of elements we have to have in our procurement contracts, and those then we release as contracts to various partners and vendors who actually put the horsepower on getting the work done and so forth and so on. The consortium, the grant was awarded to the state of Washington, and that's because the U.S. Department of Education wasn't all that comfortable about awarding a grant to just a group of people who call themselves the Smarter Balance Consortium. I mean, we don't exist as a taxable entity or a 501c3 or anything like that. So the Department of Education required that the grant be awarded to a state serving as fiscal agent. So all of the contracting for the consortium goes through the state of Washington, much as the contracting for the Hawaii assessment system goes through the state office here. But the description of what's in those contracts and the decision about to whom to award the contracts and the management of the contracts, the day-to-day watchdogging of is it going according to plan, is managed by these various work groups. Hawaii has a lot of involvement in these work groups, and you actually have membership in the Formative Assessment and Professional Practices work group, which is the group that's associated with one of the 3 key elements of our overall system design, which I'll get to in just a second. You have membership on the reporting group, which is what the reports will look like, and not only what they will look like, but how will they integrate? How much will be static reports that will be consortium-wide? What will be flexible that Hawaii can design on its own for our teachers and parents? And how will it all integrate with the data system that we collect? And finally, membership on the test design group, which is wrestling with such questions as overall, how long should this assessment be? How many short answer questions, how many long answer questions, and so forth and so on, that you all know well about as you're designing assessments. Fundamentally, the decision-making for the consortium flows through originally with our original grant application, which had a theory of action, included what kinds of things we said we would deliver, and the Department of Education said we would be required to deliver. And then, in addition to that, the various timelines and so forth and so on that we said we would adhere to. Then it goes on to our overall design, which does require using expert consultation with folks serving as experts across the technical advisory committees and various other advisory groups that we've employed. And then we do use our states for various review, And finally, we require that any large policy decisions are approved by our governing states, and we're trying to follow a consensus model. And so far, all of our policy decisions have been approved with more than 90% approval across our governing states. And that's probably a testament to the fact that we do just value to a large extent the importance of engagement and continuing conversation on how this overall program is going. And then finally, moving on to implementation, having enterprise level approaches, which means making sure that we have systems that allow for the implementation of our assessments through the computer networking and the database networking. We have a priority for open sourcing, so the test application tools that we're developing will be in an open source. This is not a trivial point because Smarter Balance does not intend to become the next Pearson assessment company. We don't want to become the next largest assessment company in the world. So what we'd like to do is afford states to choose how they want to implement this system and have Smarter Balance serve in the role of a sort of a quality assurance entity that makes sure that the tests are being delivered appropriately using a software that meets the standards that Smarter Balance has established. This will put the burden back onto the various vendors and testing companies, the requirement to actually deliver on quality services, as opposed to just kind of trying to nickel and dime you with regard to who can deliver a testing system at the cheapest rate. So we think that states and collaboratives of states will be able to take great advantage of this and get much more higher quality for your dollar. And we do have a priority on quality, and we are continuing to develop standards for the delivery of assessment. So what's our overall approach? We are kind of founded on some organizing principles. First of all, we want an integrated system. We want this not to just be a test, but to be a system of assessments that can move towards improved teaching and learning. Additionally, we want to use something that's called evidence-based design. And this is a kind of a new way of thinking about assessments that requires that as you're developing items and tasks that challenge students, that you present them to students in small groups, listen to what they have to say, watch them as they work, make sure that what you're assessing truly is the construct that you're going after, and that you're not actually assessing something like some students know how the computer works and others don't, and so forth and so on. And that's all embedded in evidence-centered design, which is something that we are committed to. A lot of teacher involvement. All of our assessment items will have been touched by teachers. Almost all of them will have been written by teachers, and they certainly will have all been reviewed for content review and for bias and sensitivity by educators. We have, I've already talked about being state-led. This focus on improving teaching and learning is kind of embedded in the next slide, but we asked ourselves early on as we were writing this proposal to the Department of Education, what's the role of assessment? I mean, okay, so the Department of Ed says we need these accountability tests, but fundamentally, what's the role here? Assessment can't fix everything. But what we really can contribute with good quality information for teachers and school leaders, we can contribute to improving teaching and learning. We can help make sure that right and correct decisions are made about youngsters. And so that's what that element is about. We want this information we provide to be actionable. We want it to mean something to teachers, to mean something to parents, mean something to principals and policymakers. And using multiple measures, not just fill in the blank or multiple choice tests, but actually performance assessments is a task that requires students to perform. And then finally, this notion of professional standards. There are professional standards with regard to educational and psychological testing. Those are commonly used. What the state had to hand in its peer-reviewed documentation for its current assessment program was all based on those standards. There are also standards with regard to the proper use of assessment results if they are going to be used to evaluate students, the proper principles to be followed if assessment results are to evaluate programs, and the appropriate use of assessments if they are going to be used to evaluate staff. These are well-established professional standards, and we intend to adhere to those as we go. This is the kind of animated slide here. So on the right-hand side, okay, great, we have Common Core standards in K-12, that are high-quality standards, and Stephanie, thank you for your work on the left-hand side. Now on the right-hand side, we have the challenge that we all face, which is getting students to leave high school, college, and career ready. And how do we get from here to there kind of thing? Well, we think, and again, what we can contribute as an assessment system is that if teachers and schools have high-quality information, they can begin to make better decisions to improve teaching and learning. And so we've developed a three-pronged approach. This is so central to our thinking that it's even embedded in this, this logo kind of down at the bottom that we use for Smarter Balance. At the top of that triangle is the summative assessment. After all, bottom line, this is an accountability system. As a matter of fact, that's how we got the grant from the federal government, is we designed an accountability system. So the summative assessment will occur at the end of the year. It will be in about the last 12 weeks of the school year. It will assess the entire breadth and depth of the Common Core for all students. And all students will be engaged in the assessment except those with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So it will be, and it's designed to be fair for all students. I have a few more words to say about that in a minute. This will be a secure assessment because it will be used for accountability purposes. So the items will be kept in a secure environment. On the lower right-hand side is something we call the interim assessment. The interim assessment will be available throughout the year. It will draw on a pool of items and tasks that are developed and produced and go through the exact same quality control procedures as the secure item pool. But as we develop the entire pool, we will parse it into two parts. And part of it will move to the interim bank, and part of it will stay in the secure bank. The part that moves to the interim bank will be a public pool. It will be available for teachers to see what the items are. It will be available for students to see what the tasks are, what the scoring guides are. They will be able to look at their own work and then look at the rubric and see what work was expected on a task with that kind of a question and see where that gap is. And I think you can well imagine how over time teachers will begin to internalize and better understand what's on this end of the year summative assessment as they use and become familiar with this interim assessment. And over time, students will begin to incorporate and internalize what the expectations and the standards are as described in the assessment system. The goal here between the interim and the summative assessment is to have an end of the year summative assessment where there's no surprises. I mean, will there be students who don't meet standard? Yeah. But what we want is no one to be shocked and surprised by the fact that maybe this student isn't quite up to standard and where they need to go next and so forth and so on. That should really be well understood and addressed during the school year. Hawaii currently uses a model of having the assessment available 3 times a year. And so our system, the Smarter Balance system, has that summative assessment available at the end of the year. But these interim assessments are as many times as you want to give them. And so it affords us multiple opportunities to see what's going on. Beyond that, they are extremely flexible in their design. So if there's one teacher who wants to, in November, see how his or her students are doing in writing, they can select the standards associated with writing, and the test engine will build an assessment for writing for that classroom of students. And if there's a teacher across the hall who at that particular time also wants to see how his or her students are doing with regard to understanding of numbers in base 10, they can select those standards, and the test engine will build an assessment that will assess those particular standards. And in later time, that can be done, I think you can imagine that can just be done again and again and again. One of those options that you can choose as a teacher is to, like a select all option, and the test engine will essentially create a public version of the summative test. That's something that you can look at how the student would have done on the entire assessment. So what we're trying to do here is remove the mystery from the summative assessment by providing some tools in the interim assessment, which will be on the same scale as the summative assessment, and will report student performance at the same level of proficiency as necessary for the summative. The last leg of the triangle is bringing this to life in the classroom. Because the interim and the summative are given on the computer, they are assessment activities. Everybody takes a deep breath and goes and takes a test, kind of a thing. And we recognize as a consortium that teachers need to get much more skilled at integrating quality assessments into their day-to-day instruction. The classroom-based assessment circumstance in this country is appalling. Most studies indicate that teachers spend on the order of 30 to 35% of their time, that's in school time and at home time, doing assessment activities. That's making tests, that's grading tests, that's scoring them, that's putting them in the grade book, that's all of that stuff. About a third of teacher activity is spent on things that are like assessment activity. And most teacher preparation programs don't require any training in how to do assessment in the classroom. And so we intend to address that with this third component, which is the formative assessment practices and professional learning tools, which will provide resources and tools on providing professional development activities for teachers, exemplary lessons that have associated with them good, high-quality assessment tasks and the kinds of things you might want to do. This is not a curriculum component. We are not going to illustrate how to teach everything that's in the Common Core, but there will be high-quality examples of the kinds of things that classroom teachers can do with the Common Core and assessing them that have proven to be successful. So that's our whole system. So unlike, I think, most assessment programs across states, I think you can see that there's a difference here in order of the quality of what we're